I don't think anybody had this trade on their bingo card going into this NBA offseason. Lamelo Ball is officially a Minnesota Timberwolf. What is up, Best Ones Worldwide? It's the Best One DBTV here, back with a brand new video. If you're not a Best One yet already, recommend you to hit that subscribe button now, turn on the post notifications, because of course you already know the grind is real. And earlier today, Lamelo Ball, Charlotte Hornets franchise point guard, got traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves, going from the East to the West for a bunch of draft capital and fan favorite Naz Reid. And I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on the trade from both sides, and of course why I think this is a bad move for both the Charlotte Hornets and the Minnesota Timberwolves. But before we get into that, just want to plug my We Are Wrestling YouTube channel. If you're into the WWE, if you're into pro wrestling, recommend you guys to go check out We Are Wrestling. I have a live podcast I do every Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific. I do live watch-alongs for all the AEW pay-per-views and WWE PLEs, and I make wrestling content like this over there. So if you are into pro wrestling, go check out We Are Wrestling. Link is down below. One more thing before we get into this blockbuster trade, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has been subscribing to the channel and watching the videos this past week since making my return to DBTV. We have not posted consistently for the last couple of years because I did go into different directions, started to fall out of love with the game of basketball. But since the next one, for some reason, I just feel like the time is right to come back and give you guys the best basketball, the best content possible, because we are going to try some new things here. And you guys have been really killing it with the views, really been killing it with the subscribe rate. And hopefully by the end of the summer, we can monetize this channel so I can give you guys the best content possible. But with that being said, let's get into this blockbuster trade. So earlier today, Sham dropped a bomb. You would think Woj came out of retirement. The Minnesota Timberwolves have received the Charlotte Hornets franchise point guard Lamelo Ball and Josh Green, and the Charlotte Hornets received Naz Reid, fan favorite from Minnesota, a 2033 unprotected first-round pick, 3 first-round pick swaps, with the Timberwolves getting the 2028, 2029, and 2030 pick swaps, and 3 second-round picks from 2029, 2032, and 2033. And I want to talk about the Charlotte Hornets, and then we'll get into the Minnesota Timberwolves, because this came out of left field. Trading their all-star, trading their fan favorite, their franchise player, Lamelo Ball, who really brought some excitement to the city of Charlotte. And for the first time, the Charlotte Hornets have had a winning record. Going into last season, they ended up being 44-38, which the reason they did lose 38 games was because the first half of the season, they were dealing with a lot of injuries and building that team chemistry. But this was the Hornets' best record since the 2015-2016 season, when they had all-star guard Kemba Walker, who they used to build their team around. The Hornets became one of the most fun teams in the NBA during the 2025-2026 season when healthy. I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan, and it was so hard to watch net games last season because, of course, the team was tanking to try to get a top 3 pick like half the league was. But the Charlotte Hornets brought fun basketball back. And they were honestly one of the only teams this past season that I was watching games on the League Pass and I was generally enjoying basketball again, which was very hard for me because I am a Nets fan and we suffer a lot. But the Hornets were just playing such great basketball. And then going into the new year, January 1st, 2026, this Hornets team did a complete 180 because for the last few seasons, they were competing for lottery balls, but they looked like a legit threat, beating some of the best teams in the East and even the West. And going into after the All-Star break, the Hornets went 18-9, and going from being in the lottery to being the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference, losing to the Miami Heat in the play-in game, which I think a lot of us in the NBA were rooting for the Hornets to go in the playoffs. because they were a legit threat during the second half of the NBA season. And even the stats back up what I'm saying, because the Charlotte Hornets scored 123.6 points per possession last season, ranking them number 5 in the whole NBA, right behind the San Antonio Spurs and New York Knicks, who are both in the finals competing for a championship, the Boston Celtics at number 2, and the Denver Nuggets at number 1, with 122.6 points per possession. And this was with Lamelo Ball on the court with a healthy season. And without Lamelo Ball, they only scored 110.6 points per possession. And defensively, the Hornets saw a massive progression, ranking number 12, which, if you know the Hornets were one of the worst defensive teams in the NBA for quite a while. But this season, they started to see lots of progress both offensively and defensively. And I think the Charlotte Hornets started to see a lot of this progress because LaMelo Ball was finally healthy, and he finally had some solid pieces with Brandon Miller and Con Knipple on the court with him. And in the 2025-2023 season, LaMelo played 73 out of 83 games. That does include the play-in. This was his first full healthy season since the 2021-2022 season, where he played 75 out of 82 games, which was his all-star season. But after that all-star season, LaMelo Ball not only was not helping the Hornets get to the playoffs, but he also was sustaining a lot of ankle injuries, and he was having issues off the court, which led to him not being out there to help the Hornets win basketball games. But this past season, something clicked with this Hornets team that we haven't seen at all. And LaMelo Ball, I think a lot of his play style really helped unlock some new things with this organization, with this franchise that has been struggling for years to find their identity. LaMelo unlocked a lot of new things with this team, and it just really doesn't add up why the Hornets thought this was a good idea to move on from LaMelo and go all in with Coby White, who they did trade for at the deadline. He was a great backup six-man off the bench for this Hornets team, which did help them in the second half of the season as well, because Chicago was shopping a lot of their players, making a lot of trades. I think the Hornets were very smart for going after Coby White, and I think on a contending championship team, he is a solid, perfect backup to have on there. But the Hornets, it looks like they're committed to him, because Sham also reported a couple hours after this trade went down that the Hornets have locked in Coby White to a 3-year, $74 million contract. So it seems like the direction that the Hornets are going in is building around their rookie who had a record-breaking season, Con Knipple, and Brandon Miller, who they selected with the pick number 2 in the 2023 NBA draft. Seems like the direction that they're going is building around these two young guys. But I think LaMelo Ball really did help unlock a lot of their game as well, because they did get to see the court together this season. And Con Knipple, I don't think that he has this record-breaking rookie season without LaMelo Ball facilitating and playmaking and getting him those open three-point shots. I think that a lot of what we saw this last season, we would have never saw it if LaMelo Ball was not on the team. And I think him being healthy, that's the reason why the Charlotte Hornets started to play winning basketball. LaMelo's numbers went down, but his efficiency went up, and he looked like a elite point guard. But one of the good things that they did get in return with this deal is Naz Reid, because he is a big guy who was a former Sixth Man of the Year. He's probably going to be a starter on this team going into the new season. And they could also do some new things with him on the court. But Miles Bridges, as of right now, they are shopping him because they do want to get that salary off the books. And it looks like they are going in a younger route with this organization, with this team, which I don't understand, because it felt like we were taking steps forward. And I think without LaMelo Ball's playmaking, we are going to take some steps back. But I believe going into next season, without LaMelo Ball facilitating and playmaking for the Charlotte Hornets, we're going to see them regress offensively. And I think that Con Knipple and Brandon Miller are going to struggle scoring the ball, because I think Lamelo does make it easy for a lot of the people around him, because he is an unpredictable player where sometimes you have to throw two people on him because you don't know if the man's going to shoot a half-court shot. And he's one of those guys that you just can't leave open because he'll make the shot usually 95 out of 100 times. But I think them making this move, I think this was way too soon. I think they should have went into next season, saw what this team was capable of doing, having a full healthy season, not just the second half, but a full 82 games, see what they could do in the Eastern Conference. Because I do think that if they had more time together, and we didn't count the first half of the 2025-2026 season, the Hornets would have probably made the playoffs, and they would have given the Knicks, the Pistons, the Cavaliers, or the Celtics a run for their money. I do firmly believe that. They just had one bad game against Miami, which is why they weren't able to advance in the play-in tournament. But in a regular NBA playoffs, you have to win 4 out of 7 games to move on to the next round. And I think a lot of these teams, they were struggling in that second half to go when they were facing the Charlotte Hornets. So I really don't like this for the Hornets. And I think that we are going to see them offensively regress. And I think that Con Knipple could have a sophomore slump, having Kobe White as the starting point guard over LaMelo Ball. But let's get into the Minnesota Timberwolves here, because this was probably one of the most riskiest moves I have ever seen from an organization in a pretty long time. This is a Milwaukee Bucks Phoenix Suns risky deal, because the Timberwolves officially don't have any draft capital until 2034, which is absolutely mind-blowing. Also, they don't even have any salary cap either, so they can't really go after the mid-level exceptions, and they can only sign vet minimums. So they better hope that that buyout market is good, and they better hope that the Sacramento Kings decide to buy out DeRozan, Zach LaVine. They better hope that some of these bad teams decide to move on from these bad contracts so that they could sign them for the vet minimums. But having LaMelo Ball, though, is going to help Anthony Edwards out a lot, because Anthony Edwards is a guy who gets double-teamed every night. Anthony Edwards is the superstar of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and he has not had his Scottie Pippen. And you're going to hear that throughout this entire video. And the Minnesota Timberwolves went to the Eastern Conference Finals with Anthony Edwards when he had Karl Anthony Towns. But after the season, they didn't want to fall into the second apron, so they decided to trade Karl Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo, which led the New York Knicks to winning an NBA championship this past season. Karl Anthony Towns helping Jalen Brunson get that championship ring. And the Knicks were willing to pay Karl Anthony Towns. And the Julius Randle experiment just didn't work for the Timberwolves, because I do think Karl Anthony Towns' deal was not a good one for the Wolves. I think that they should have given it more time, because they were literally one step away from going to the conference finals to the NBA championship, and they probably could have won the title, which I think they should have just ran it back. But instead, they panicked, and they ended up trading Karl Anthony Towns for Julius Randle, which Randle is a good player, but he is not a Karl Anthony Towns caliber player. And I just think that Randle and Edwards experiment just didn't work, which is why they traded him to the Brooklyn Nets for basically nothing, so that they could create some cap space to go after somebody to pair with Anthony Edwards, and that's what they did here with LaMelo Ball. I do think that this was a panic move for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the time is ticking, because they do have a superstar, Anthony Edwards, who is about to hit his prime, who was drafted with their number 1 pick back in the 2020 NBA draft. He has led this team to the conference finals. He has been so close to winning it all, but he has just always come up short. And if the Minnesota Timberwolves do not see progress and they do not get an NBA championship with Anthony Edwards, he might be the next superstar from the Minnesota Timberwolves that is on the move. And every superstar that has worn a Minnesota Timberwolves jersey has left and won an NBA championship. Kevin Garnett, was the first superstar the Minnesota Timberwolves had, went to Boston in 2008, won a title. Kevin Love was the next power forward star that they had. He ended up getting traded for Andrew Wiggins, going to the Cleveland Cavaliers with Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, winning a championship in 2016, Warriors blowing a 3-1. And Karl Anthony Towns just got traded to the New York Knicks. 2 seasons later, wins an NBA championship with Jalen Brunson. So you know the Timberwolves front office is in panic mode because they do not want to lose Anthony Edwards to another team because he has proved that he could be the number 1 guy and win a championship. We just need to get him a Scottie Pippen. He needs to have that solid number 2, and I think that they saw Lamelo was on the trade block, so they thought that he could be that solid number 2. But there is a lot of risk because as much as I love Lamelo's game, he's only had really 3 healthy seasons throughout his career. And as much as I love LaMelo Ball, I love his game, this is also a massive risk because the Timberwolves basically traded all their draft capital until 2034. And LaMelo last season, yes, he did have a healthy season, playing 73 out of 83 games, including that play-in. But the seasons prior, he wasn't able to play more than 50 games, which this season he played more games combined than the last 2 seasons where he was injured. So this is a very risky move because if LaMelo gets hurt, the Minnesota Timberwolves are definitely not going to an NBA championship. But at the same time, LaMelo hasn't had that solid number 2 guy either in Charlotte. Because, of course, Brandon Miller and Con Knipple, they're both still very young in the league. They still have a lot of room to grow. So LaMelo really hasn't had that solid number 2 guy either. So maybe both of these guys will take that stress off each other. But I do think that this was not the right move. I think this is going to be a lot of fun basketball to watch because LaMelo and Anthony are flashy. They are very fun players to watch. But I don't think that they're going to be able to deliver a championship. And I do think, especially with all the salary that this team has, they're not going to be able to go and make free agency signings. They're going to have to rely on buyouts and vet minimums. That is really the only way that the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to be able to get pieces around LaMelo, Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels. Because Naz Reid was also a massive addition to the offense and the defense for the Minnesota Timberwolves as well. But here is my official overall thoughts. And we're going to start with the Charlotte Hornets here. I think personally, they should have just kept the same starting 5 going into the 2026-2027 season because they were a really good team in the second half of last season. We should have seen what they could have done having 82 games rather than 42 games. I think that they just jumped the gun right away with LaMelo because they were scared that maybe he's going to get hurt again and that this was just a fluke, a one-time thing. I think that they should have saw what the team could have done next season and then decide if the Hornets were losing more games than winning, then maybe consider trading LaMelo Ball to another team and get assets. But I do think that LaMelo was making it very easy for the players around him. And I think Con Knipple would have never broken a lot of these rookie records if it wasn't for LaMelo Ball's facilitating and playmaking. Brandon Miller, I thought, was another good piece next to LaMelo, and he made the game easy for him. So now having Kobe White, I think it's going to affect them with playmaking-wise. Because LaMelo was the facilitator of this Charlotte Hornets team. And the fast-paced basketball, LaMelo has been so accustomed to throughout his entire life because of playing with his brothers Lonzo and LiAngelo at Chino Hills. He's so used to playing that 7-second basketball that we got to see this past season with the Charlotte Hornets. So I think trading him and Kobe White being his replacement, I think long-term it is not going to help the Charlotte Hornets at all. But getting into the Minnesota Timberwolves, I do have a bold take here. And before you decide to comment that I'm delusional or crazy, just hear me out. I think the Minnesota Timberwolves, they should have waited and they should have went after Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics, and they should have done a trade built around Rudy Gobert and all that draft capital that they used for LaMelo Ball. And the reason I think the Minnesota Timberwolves should have waited because Anthony Edwards, we need that solid number 2 guy. Michael Jordan had Scottie Pippen. And I don't think Michael Jordan becomes one of the greatest of all time. I don't think Michael Jordan becomes the GOAT of basketball without having Scottie Pippen, who was a top 5 player in the NBA. Without Scottie Pippen, Michael Jordan doesn't have 6 rings. And Anthony Edwards, one of my favorite players to watch in the league, reminds me so much of a young Kobe, a young Michael Jordan. Anthony has that Mamba mentality. And that's why I believe getting him his Scottie Pippen with Jaylen Brown being that second option, I think would have really helped the Minnesota Timberwolves in a 7-game series against OKC or the San Antonio Spurs. I think having Jaylen Brown at that small forward spot would benefit the Wolves a lot more than just having a backcourt that's going to be fun, just chucking up shots with Lamelo and Edwards. And also, last season, Jason Tatum was out with his Achilles, and Jaylen Brown led a team full of nobodies to the 3rd seed in the Eastern Conference. And there were people out there saying that the Boston Celtics weren't even going to make the play-in without Jason Tatum being on the floor. And I think personally, the reason they lost that series to the Philadelphia 76ers was definitely not Jaylen Brown's fault. It was because Jason Tatum came back, and even Tatum was contemplating whether or not to come back because the chemistry with Jaylen Brown as that number 1 option, the Celtics were winning basketball games. And I think that Tatum coming back kind of ruined that momentum that Boston built behind Jaylen Brown being that number 1 option. And remind you, in the 2024 season, when the Boston Celtics won an NBA championship, Tatum was ass. The Celtics would have never got that championship if it wasn't for Jaylen Brown being there. And now with Jaylen Brown being on the trade market, Brad Stevens trying to move on from him with the whole Giannis deal, and now trying to move on from him because he knows Jaylen Brown's probably going to request a trade any day now. This past season, Jaylen Brown had an MVP caliber season. And I think Minnesota, if you paired Jaylen Brown up with Anthony Edwards, I think that they truly could win an NBA championship, especially with that minimum players and just solid role players around them. I think that Jaylen Brown could be the Scottie Pippen to Anthony Edwards, Michael Jordan. And Jaylen Brown did it with Jason Tatum a couple seasons ago. So why can't he do it with Anthony Edwards, who I personally think is a better NBA player than Jason Tatum? I think that they went into panic mode, which is why they decided to go after Lamelo Ball instead of just waiting a couple weeks and then going after Jaylen Brown. I think they made a huge mistake here. Yes, Minnesota Timberwolves basketball is going to be fun. They are going to win probably a lot more games if healthy, but I really still don't think that they could beat San Antonio or OKC in a 7-game series, and I really hope I am wrong. But I would love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. Hornet fans, how do you feel about your franchise player who became the face of the organization leaving the team after having a positive season? I would love to hear it. Minnesota, how do you feel? Do you think that LaMelo is going to get you a championship? Would love to hear it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smash that like button now. If you're not a best one yet already, recommend you guys to hit that subscribe button now. Turn on the post notifications. We're back with content, and we're going to be grinding this off season because we want to monetize this channel so that I can continue to give you guys the best content possible. If you're into wrestling, go check out We Are Wrestling. If you're into toys, go check out Best One Donnie by 2 other full-time YouTube channels. All the links down in the description box below. But of course, to all the best ones out there worldwide, we are Take It Over. Peace.
Can't ignore it, promise you can never sun that. I pray for it, get ready for the comeback. Yeah, yeah.